Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and if you are new, welcome to my channel. I am Jamie Beth. We are moving on to part 2 of our most haunted places within each state. I will link part 1 down below so that you can click on that if you want to watch that one or rewatch it or whatever you want to do. We are going to start with Illinois. And the first place in Illinois we're going to talk about is the Congress Plaza Hotel in Chicago. Now, my husband and I were in Chicago in November for our anniversary, and we drove by this Congress Plaza Hotel. I knew it was a haunted hotel, but it was cool to see it in person. I don't know why it makes it more cool. It just does. To be able to see like these things in person. It's just really neat. It is stated, but I don't know if it's 100% true, that Al Capone headquartered his operations at the Congress Plaza Hotel. His ghost is reportedly spotted at the property, especially near his 8th floor suite. To celebrate its haunted history, the Congress Plaza Hotel hosts a 3,000 person Halloween party every year. That would be so much fun. I would love going to that. The next thing we're going to talk about is the Lincoln Theater in Decatur. It is currently closed to the public, but it gained a reputation as one of the most haunted theaters around. A former stagehand whose spirit still lingers, to a woman in a long flowing dress who has been spotted on the balcony. This theater plays host to a variety of apparitions. On to Indiana. French Lick Springs Hotel in French Lick, Indiana is a historic hotel that was formerly owned by Thomas Taggart, who was completely devoted to the place. Because he was so devoted to this hotel, it's said that even his death couldn't stop him from watching over the operations. His spirit is thought to be roaming around the service elevator, even running the lift when it's getting too busy. Staff members have also heard the voices of ghostly guests at parties Taggart used to throw through the ballroom's closed doors. Next up is the historic Story Inn in Nashville, Indiana, not Tennessee. And this one is a real hair raiser. One of the inn's most commonly seen guests is a blue lady who is believed to be the wife of the town's founder, Dr. George Story. Legend says that she will appear if you leave a blue light on, and is known to occasionally leave behind a blue object as well. Guests have also reported smelling the cherry tobacco she used to smoke when she was alive. Moving along to Iowa. In Villisca, Iowa, there is the Axe Murder House. 8 people in this home were found bludgeoned to death with an axe in the early morning of June 10, 1912. More than a century later, the crime remains unsolved. Next up is the Oak Lawn Cemetery in Iowa. Established in 1843, the cemetery houses an 8-foot tall angel statue. Teresa Feltiver commissioned the once gold statue in 1912 after the death of her young son and husband. But soon after Teresa's death in 1924, the statue turned black. Local lore states that anyone that tries to touch or kiss this angel will die immediately. Visitors have also reported ghostly voices and strange orbs surrounding the statue. Next up is Kansas. We are going to talk about the Sally House in Atchison, Kansas. The alleged haunting of the Sally House was so blood-curdling that Tony and Deborah Pickman, who lived in the house with their newborn son Taylor, actually wrote a book about their experiences. Visitors supposedly have been scratched and bitten by the menacing entities within, and many unexplained voices have been recorded by paranormal investigators. Next up is Stall Cemetery. Locals know this tiny cemetery in an unincorporated Kansas township has a portal to hell that the devil comes through twice a year. As outlandish as it sounds, the ruins of a nearby church and the bizarre architecture will have you half believing the rumors. No satanic sightings have been confirmed, and anyone caught trespassing in the private cemetery can face up to $1,000 fine. So, like, just don't go there. They don't like it. Has anyone visited the Stoll Cemetery? If you have, please leave a comment down below. I would love to know your story. Moving along to Kentucky, we're going to talk about the Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville. So this sanatorium was built in 1926. The Waverly Hills Sanatorium was built to combat the outbreak of tuberculosis in the United States. So hundreds of patients died of consumption. Treatments included forcing patients outside for fresh air even in the middle of the winter, and surgically implanting balloons in the lungs and filling them with air. Most researchers now report particularly strong activity on the 5th floor, where they've seen shapes in the windows and heard voices telling them to leave. Moving along to Sauerkraut Cave. Sure, it got its name because it was once used as to age sauerkraut. There is something far more sinister fermenting in these caves. Sauerkraut Cave earned its legend because it was located beneath the Lakeland Asylum for the Insane, an institution marred by the accusations of overcrowding and mistreatment of patients. I mean, we've heard this same story like with many other asylums. It still just like makes me so mad that these poor individuals were abused the way they were. The cave beneath the now raised asylum is believed to have been an occasional escape route for inmates. But there are also rumors of bodies being buried down there. Strange visions and ghostly voices have been reported by many who have explored this cave. I do believe this place offers guided tours, so let me know again if anyone has been to these. I know I keep saying that. If anyone has been to these, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to know. Okay, the Calcasiu Courthouse in Lake Charles. The only woman to have died in Louisiana's electric chair was Tony Jo McQuiston, who was sentenced to death for stealing a car and murdering the owner to break her lover out of jail. Locals say they can still hear her ghost whispering, walking around, and occasionally screaming. Some even detect the aroma of her perfume. St. Roche Chapel, Yellow Fever Shrine. In the 19th century, yellow fever swept New Orleans, but Reverend Peter Thavis, the pastor of the Holy Trinity Catholic Church, had a plan. He prayed to St. Roche, who is most identified with good health and healing, asking for members of his parish to be shielded from the disease and promising to build a shrine for the saint in gratitude. While 40,000 New Orleanians died, no one in Father Thavis' community perished. Today, people still visit the St. Roche Chapel, leaving offerings around the shrine. Among the artifacts are children's polio braces, crutches, rows of prosthetic legs, plaster feet, false teeth, and fake eyeballs. On to Maine. Maine is a state that is definitely on my bucket list. We're now going to visit the Mount Hope Cemetery. You know who grew up in Maine? Stephen King. It's no surprise, really, that the part of the 1989 Pet Sematary adaptation was shot here. For extra scares, watch the movie before a nighttime stroll through this creepy 181-year-old cemetery and see if you can find the spot where Gage was buried. On the way, you'll see some of the first Civil War monuments ever constructed and grave markers that date back to 1836. Bangor, I think is how it's pronounced, I'm not sure, I'm so sorry, is also the location of King's house, fronted by wrought iron gates decorated with bats. Both are part of several Stephen King tours, which take you to sites around Bangor, inspired his novels. If you are a fan of Stephen King and have read any of his books, let me know in the comments below which book you have read. I've actually read a few of Stephen King's novels. One that I really like is called The Langoliers. That one's really good. And then, of course, The Shining, because who hasn't read that or seen the movie? I love the book. Is awesome, though. I really do like that one. And I've read It, which is about, everyone knows It. I won't watch the movie, but I did read the book. Located in the town of Skowhegan, Maine, is Lake George Regional Park West. Founded in 1992, the day-use park has cabins, group facilities, playing fields, and places for picnicking. Users of the park also have the ability to go hiking, fishing, swimming, and boating. Although Lake George Regional Park West has been around for less than 3 decades, it is no stranger to paranormal activity. In one particular instance, 4 kids were walking through the woods when they came upon a cabin. Curious as to what the cabin had inside it, two of the kids lifted a smaller one to take a look to see what was inside the foggy windows. The kids saw a dusty old table with chairs randomly placed around and folded up. Nothing out of the ordinary. However, when another kid went inside to have a look for herself, what she found was something very different than what her friends described. What she saw was a large, clean, rectangular table with all of the chairs perfectly seated around it. Moving along to Maryland. We are now going to talk about the Dr. Samuel A. Mudd House in Waldorf. After assassin John Wilkes Booth shot President Abraham Lincoln in the Ford Theater, he jumped off the balcony and broke his leg. He fled to Dr. Samuel A. Mudd's house for 3 days. Many visitors of the house turned museum have reported feeling chills and tugs on their clothing and seeing shadowy profiles and deep impressions in Booth's bed. Next up is a place called Coffin Rock. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this name. The Blair Witch Project still pulls tourists to Burkittsville, Maryland to find where most of the film was shot, though you need to head into Black Hills Forest about 20 minutes west of the town to find Coffin Rock. It is a large flat rock near the creek in the middle of the woods. It's where a Maryland search party went missing in 1886 while looking for an 8-year-old Robin Weaver. The kid eventually returned to town, but the search party did not. A second search party found disemboweled bodies bound at the hands and feet on Coffin Rock. These bodies later vanished when the search party returned with backup help. Local legend attributes all of this to the so-called Blair Witch. You can, of course, retrace those steps in history. Just bring a flashlight and a good pair of running shoes. Now, I was under the impression that the whole Blair Witch thing was made up, even Coffin Rock. I didn't know that was an actual story, which makes this even creepier. I mean, it does. To me, it makes it sound even creepier, knowing that that is an actual place where something bad happened. We are now to Massachusetts. We are now in the Spider Gates Cemetery. Local lore believes that this 1740 Quaker cemetery is the gateway to another dimension. Set back from the main road and past a stream that some folks think is the mouth of the river Styx, the iron gate serves as the entrance to a secluded graveyard lovingly known as the 8th gate to hell. Visitors agree that the other 7 gates don't actually exist, but that doesn't explain a history of questionable activity. Ghostly sightings, strange noises, and evidence of satanic rituals conducted on the stone altar. Coins left on Marmaduke Earl's gravesite might buy you a conversation with the departed. Next up is the Hoosick Tunnel. It is a railroad underpass in the northern Berkshires that run from North Adams to Florida, Massachusetts. The tunnel has also been dubbed the Bloody Pit. thanks to the ungodly amount of people who died during its construction. The final number is disputed. It is believed to be around roughly 200 men that lost their lives from 1851 to 1875 before the tunnel was completed. One particularly disturbing incident began when a 1,000-foot central exhaust shaft exploded, destroying a hoist that was used to lower men and equipment down the tunnel. Miners near the top attempted to rescue those below, but eventually gave up, assuming that everyone had perished in the rubble. Months later, they discovered a makeshift raft, the only evidence of a few long-gone survivors that spent their final moments entombed in the ground. Okay, next up is my home state, Michigan. And in Michigan, we have many crazy little areas that are extremely haunted. A couple of my favorites are the Ada Witch and the Findlay Cemetery. Ada, Michigan isn't super close where I live, but a crazy little cemetery. In the early 1800s in Ada, Michigan, an adulterous woman was followed by her husband as she went to meet her lover. As the story goes, her husband watched for proof of the cheating before he busted into the scene and killed his wayward wife. After she was dead, he turned on the lover and they fought until both had fallen. Today, the woman's ghost has been spotted in Seidman Park, where the murder supposedly occurred, Honey Creek Road, where her body was found, and Findlay Cemetery, where she is now buried. Now, here is the interesting part. Historians have researched the story of the unfortunate woman, and they have been unable to prove that any such murder occurred or that she is even buried in the Findlay Cemetery. There's no police report that exists that talks about this triple homicide, nor is there evidence explaining why her ghost is referred to as a witch. Maybe you should decide whose ghost is responsible for the bluish mist, the weeping, the shoulder tapping, and footsteps heard around the Findlay Cemetery. Okay, we are going to move along to Rockford, Michigan now, which I believe is only less than 20 miles from Ada. And in Rockford, Michigan is the Hell's Bridge, where we will find the ghost of Elias Frisk. Rockford was first inhabited years ago. Their surrounding woods and the Rouge River were a source of resources and adventure for the people in settling there. When children began going missing in the early 1800s, the townspeople banded together in the church to split parents up into search parties. Old Elias Frisk warned parents of the terrifying demons surrounding the town and volunteered to stay behind with the remaining children while parents searched for their loved ones. As soon as the parents were out of town, Frisk led his charges into the woods along the bank of the Rouge River and brutally murdered them in the same place he had killed the others. As this madman was pitching the children off the newly built bridge, horrified parents came to the scene of the crime. Although Elias Frisk pled for mercy and insisted it was demons who forced his hand, the townspeople hung him from the bridge that came to be known as Hell's Bridge, and left his body there until the water wore away the rope holding him. Today, swimmers will feel a little tug at their ankles, and the devil's laughter is said to echo the bridge after dark. So there you have a couple of the crazy, scary stories that are in the state that I live in. On to Minnesota. We are going to talk about another bridge. This is called Crazy Annie's Bridge. This seemingly ordinary bridge at 270th Street is anything but that after nightfall. The bridge earned its nickname because locals say it is haunted by a woman named Crazy Annie. Crazy Annie was a World War I widow who drowned her 3 children in the nearby creek before hanging herself from a tree. Visitors who venture to the bridge after 11 have heard ungodly screams, seen faces floating in the darkness and figures fleeting through the woods, and found handprints on their vehicles after returning home. I did read that the cops will bust you for loitering, so tread lightly when you guys are visiting this bridge. Wabasha Street Caves. One of the creepiest and most accessible is the Wabasha Street Caves. This is one of the liveliest places on the list. An underground speakeasy from the 30s that still hosts weddings and parties so good that the original folks never seem to have left. That apparently includes the ghosts of 3 gangsters who, in the cave's bootlegging days, skipped out on their check by getting murdered and buried in the floors. To this day, people report seeing uninvited, very dapper guests roaming the halls, along with the ghost of a bartender and a madam. On to Mississippi. We are now going to talk about the King's Tavern. Built sometime before 1789, King's Tavern is the oldest and most storied building in Natchez. It has played host to travelers along the Natchez Trail, as well as more unsavory characters. But it wasn't until the 1930s, when the building's owners were renovating, that they made a spooky discovery. In the building's basement, they found 3 mummified corpses, including a female believed to be the mistress of the tavern's original owner. Reportedly, the ghost of this woman is responsible for much paranormal mischief, including knocking jars off of shelves, tracking mud on freshly mopped floors, and opening or closing doors at will. That is interesting. That would be another place that I would like to visit if I'm ever in Mississippi. We are moving on to the University of Mississippi Medical Center. In 2014, construction workers beginning to build a parking lot came across a mass grave of about 7,000 former Mississippi State Lunatic Asylum residents from the turn of the 20th century. Estimating the cost for outside contractors to remove and rebury the remains would cost an extra $21 million or so. Officials decided to let them rest in peace until they can exhume the bodies through university channels and build a historical center where the parking lot would have stood. Until then, it's one heck of a spooky place to pay your respects to anonymous thousands of dead. That concludes part 2 of the scariest places in each state. So part 3 will begin with Missouri. I hope you guys are enjoying this little multi-part series, I guess is what you would call it. If you are, give it a thumbs up and remember to hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't already, as well as the notification bell next to it to be notified of all of my upcoming videos. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.